All right. So, anyways, I guess in a way, I almost pulled like a Baron type move there, huh? So, anyways, Attorney Greg Lake here. Welcome to the Entheogenic Esquire podcast and YouTube channel. Very honored and happy and glad for you to be here today. Thank you for laughing. I'm laughing at myself too, Susan. As I was saying, y'all might have been able to read my lips, but I was saying I've got some of my regular subscribers here, Miss Susan. I got the Mad TV, Kitzel Pie. Hoaxing, how you doing? Is it bad echo? Baron too. How you doing, Linda? And then I think I saw Lizard here too. So how are y'all doing today? Thank y'all for coming. From the bottom of my heart, very grateful. I really do love y'all, and we're gonna have a good one today. I was actually, to be quite honest, and just so let me say this: today we're gonna talk about. We did these episodes previously where one, we pointed out, me specifically pointed out Erika Kirk's violation of the tax code, in our opinion, right? In our opinion. Hello, Linda. Uh, our opinion that the political endorsement of JD Vance at Amfest in 2025 seemed to be a pretty clear violation of the restriction under 501c3 against, doing political activity. Wolves and Finance brought it up. I think there's been some other commentators that have also looked at that, and I think there's pretty good consensus that seems to be violative of the tax code. And then we looked at some previous, right? So I pulled out that article for Ministry Watch where Charlie Kirk and Rob McCoy had said, or in so many words said, no, we don't intend with TP Faith, right, which was a subsidiary, like a project within TPUSA, did not intend to respect the restrictions under 501c3 against essentially preaching politics from the pulpit, for 501c3 churches not to be essentially supporting or opposing candidates in church. And so we saw where it didn't seem like they had a really solid intention of following that restriction. And so we've just been talking generally about this. Now, episode or two ago, we got into looking into could we expect some enforcement for these, what we've perceived to be IRS code violations? And then we kind of assess the political situation, political climate, the social situation between TPUSA and the Trump administration. And we kind of came to an idea that, at least as it relates through the IRS, we might not be seeing any enforcement coming soon. And that was really also supported by the letter that was shown on Wolves and Finance's episode, from the Treasury Secretary. He said, "Oh, Linda, I was trying to make a Baron 2.0 joke, but it didn't work." Well, look, I appreciate it. The reference to Baron, I do look up to Baron. I think he's got a great show. I've been watching him pretty much since this investigation he came up. So yeah, thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. I hope I can do a good job like Baron. But anyways, yeah. So we were, basically gauging that we might not hold our breath as it relates to the IRS, right, for a whole host of other reasons. So, and I did touch a little bit upon in those episodes that, accountability for TPUSA might not, there are other avenues, I guess I'd say. And I think I mentioned then that for nonprofits, at least, and nonprofit governance for sure, is predicated, or it is established under state law. And in most states, the attorney general is typically the one to enforce those laws. Now, we will speak a little bit about individual lawsuits, but in the context of suing a nonprofit for a failure of appropriate corporate governance is really the attorney general's job, and or the IRS potentially. And we're going to talk a little bit about the IRS today, but mostly we're going to be focused on what could, and in this instance, we're going to talk about Indiana's attorney general. And you might say, Greg, well, why is that? Well, the state filing, actual records, is where TPUSA is actually domiciled or headquartered on paper, is actually in Indiana, although we do know that their main office, stuff like that, is in Arizona. A legal filings perspective, they're actually domiciled, headquartered for that purpose in Indiana. So we're going to talk today about, could Indiana's attorney general do anything about the stuff that we're seeing that we perceive to be violations of state and federal law? If so, what is the standard? Who could they go after? Could they go after just TPUSA, the entity? Could they go after actually the directors personally? And if so, what are the remedies in either of those scenarios? Then we're also, again, we're going to touch a little bit on the IRS code today because I wanted to point some stuff out. And then we're going to, at the end, switch and look at, could the donors do anything or hold TPUSA accountable for any potential, illegal things that they maybe hypothetically could have done contrary to the donors. So we're going to cover those situations today. As indicated, either on my thumbnail or in my description, I want to ask the question, and hey, reference Baron. Baron inspired me the other night after he went through Erika Kirk's Zoom call and expressed his concerns. And, in a lot of the concerns too, really relate to, and I'm not trying to be mean or condescending here, but like, is Erika Kirk actually qualified to run this thing? Right. And I mean, I think that's a very legitimate question to ask. Not that, again, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that she's stupid and all these things, but with Turning Point USA being as large of a nonprofit as it is, and Charlie Kirk did incredible work to get it to where he did, it's not just anybody off the street can walk up and be fit to take that kind of thing over and do so in a beneficial way that's a positive benefit, both for the public at large, TPUSA employees, and TPUSA itself. So we're going to talk about that. So because these directors apparently at TPUSA, from my understanding, we're going to operate off this premise. I'll put it to you like this. We're going to operate off the premise that Erika, and I do believe this to be true. I just don't have like documents or something like right in front of me to show you to prove it. But essentially, we're going to run off the impetus that Erika Kirk was placed as CEO of Turning Point USA because that's what Charlie would want. Okay. We're going to be looking at, they actually pointed her because that was Charlie would want versus what is the norm? What is normally required from a legal perspective of nonprofits such as TPUSA when either hiring a CEO or replacing a CEO? Just willy-nilly picking people up off the street, not saying that like Erika Kirk's when they picked up off the street, but it's kind of like just picking a random person or a person that has not applied and done an interview and come and told the board how great they can benefit the corporation, hiring based upon essentially legacy. Oh, this is what Charlie would want versus actually doing a process. Is there any legal liability for them doing that? And again, then we're going to run that whole analysis out. So let's real quick talk about Indiana state law as it relates to the duty of care, okay, the standard of care of nonprofit directors and executives, right? So Erika Kirk's CEO, but she was, per the law, she had to have been placed in that position by the board. And so the board has a duty of care to the entity itself and to the larger public to be reasonable and not be negligent or reckless or anything like that. Because if a nonprofit CEO comes and is terrible and fails, well, then its charitable mission goes to the wayside and the public does not receive the incidental benefit, which was originally intended. And so that is why, because ultimately the public are the beneficiaries of nonprofit work, that is why it's the Attorney General normally that does the enforcement on behalf of the public against entities like Turning Point and other similar nonprofits. So I hope everybody understands that. Again, to talk about whether TPUSA's donors have any kind of type of recourse or can hold them accountable in any way. We're going to talk about that too. But right now we're going to talk about AG enforcement against TPUSA. I was looking at Linda's comment. So yeah, against TPUSA, what could be done? So real quick, let's talk about, again, what is the standard under Indiana state law? Okay. And this is kind of the issue. I'll reframe it again that we're looking at is, did TPUSA's board violate its duty of care by hiring Erika Kirk as CEO of Turning Point based upon this is what Charlie would want and not in an actual competitive hiring process, right? So, how could TPUSA's board ensure that placing Erika Kirk as CEO is in the public's best interest versus opening that process up for people to actually apply competitively for the position? So, under Indiana state law, it says a director must act in good faith with the care of an ordinarily prudent person and in a manner the director reasonably believes is in the corporation's best interest. And so there will be a dichotomy here too, is that what is the standard of care where, because there's two different ones here. One standard is for the attorney general to go after TPUSA entity and seek some type of retribution versus the attorney general being able to go after individual directors for potentially monetary damages, et cetera, et cetera. So those are two standards. And so I'll just let you know that the entity level liability, okay, is really what I just read. That's the standard for the attorney general to be able to come in on an entity level and do what needs to be done to correct the issues, all the way to the extreme of actually putting a nonprofit like TPUSA potentially in a receivership, right? So there's a whole range, spectrum of potential relief that the attorney general could acquire on behalf of the public, just depending on the circumstances. And again, it ranges everywhere from removing an officer or director that was wrongfully, put in place, to actually putting the whole entity into a receivership and shutting it down. Okay. And so let's talk real quick. Like I said, I'll read it again real quick. A director must act in good faith with the care of an ordinarily prudent person in a manner the director reasonably believes in the corporation's best interest. So we're asking that question right now, is whether TPUSA's board members fit within that paradigm. Okay. And so that right there is the standard whereby the attorney general could go after TPUSA as an entity. What is required for the attorney general in Indiana to be able to go personally after TPUSA's board members? Okay. And so this isn't something I'm advocating for, right? I'm not advocating for the attorney general to like go and sue all the directors and, get a judgment against them and take their house, all that. I'm definitely not. I do hope for some enforcement to the extent that there's, they're able to firm up on there's definitely violations here. But exactly what that looks like, that's going to be completely up to the AG's discretion. So what about personal liability? What's the standard to hold the directors personally liable? So think about the standard I just stated. But with that, you have to go an extra level. And it has to be, so their breach of that duty, okay, whenever they breach this duty of reasonable care of an ordinarily prudent person, it has to rise to the level of willful misconduct or recklessness, right? So was TPUSA's board, okay, by putting Erika Kirk as CEO because that's Charlie's wishes versus actually doing a hiring process, does that rise to the level of willful misconduct or recklessness? And so if it did, right, if just assuming that it did, that would give the attorney general the ability to actually go after the directors personally. And so whatever monetary damages that the TPUSA or whatever a hypothetical nonprofit suffered could actually be recovered potentially against the directors who either willfully or recklessly or with willful misconduct, it was willful misconduct, then they'd be able to go after them and seek retribution. Otherwise, if it doesn't rise to that level, the Indiana Attorney General could just simply go after Turning Point, the entity itself. Okay, so I hope that distinction makes sense. And I will come back hoaxing at the end of this and finish up on a lot of these chats. So I apologize, but I want to get kind of the lesson over as I have been doing, kind of go through the lesson first or the information, and we'll address some of these questions at the end. But thank y'all for being here and thank y'all for chatting. I very much appreciate it. So and on a more overarching level, the reason why it's the attorney general and these things. And I kind of said it a minute ago, but Indiana, like many, many, many other states, treat these nonprofits as kind of a public trust. And so in that way, we could kind of think about the attorney general as the trustee on behalf of the public over these nonprofit entities like TPUSA. And so whenever they're appointing a CEO like Erika Kirk based upon this is what Charlie would want and not actually a competitive hiring process, it undermines donor confidence. It surely can. It certainly invites the attorney general to go and take a look at that. It should anyways, right? And it should, in a theoretical world, increase IRS scrutiny. Obviously, we haven't seen any of this that we're aware of yet. As a matter of fact, the IRS states, oh, we're not investigating TPUSA. And so, hey, what can I say? Maybe writing an email or reaching out to the Indiana Attorney General might prompt them to get involved and take a look at what's been going on, because there very well probably are some things beyond just the appointment. I'm not even call it a hiring, appointment of Erika Kirk as CEO. There could be other things beyond that that could be investigated and potentially could be violations, right? Again, this is all just speculation in a lot of ways. So I don't want y'all to think that this is true. And also, too, this is, especially when I get into the end of this towards the donor stuff, this is not legal advice. I'm just speaking generally about legal, legal principles, things of that nature that potentially apply these situations with the intent of giving everyone here an idea of what, if any, accountability TPUSA could face if the laws were actually executed the way that they were intended to be. So what are the remedies? And I talked about this a little bit, but let me get into some specifics real quick on what type of remedies could the Attorney General seek or acquire if they were to go after TPUSA at the entity level. They can mandate governance reform. So basically they can affect or change the way that TPUSA is governing itself. For instance, in this situation, they very well could mandate that the TPUSA board, adopt some type of, agreeable or reasonable hiring process that they must, in the future, abide by. So that's an example of what that would be. Removal of Erika Kirk as CEO. So that would probably be the easiest, most straightforward remedy if if the Attorney General did indeed find that the appointment of Erika Kirk transgressed the director's duty of care. They certainly could go remove Erika Kirk as CEO. They can appoint an independent manager. So they could, for instance, temporarily appoint an independent person to come in and act as CEO, why the board goes through its brand new process to go and actually find someone that's qualified to do it. Compliance agreements, so they can make the board sign an agreement that they're going to apply XYZ moving forward. Restitution of improperly paid compensation. And so admittedly, this is one thing we don't know. We don't know if Erika Kirk is being paid, and if so, what she's being paid. Okay. And I'm not going to speculate on that, but I'll just say for purposes of this live stream today, we're just going to assume that yes, she's being paid, and we're going to assume that she's being paid the same thing as Charlie was making whenever he passed. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I think it was at least several $100,000 a year. So we're going to operate off that assumption. And so if that was true, the Indiana Attorney General could seek, her to come off, as we say in the streets, to come off some of the ill-gotten gains, or all of the ill-gotten gains, is most certainly one avenue that they go down. I need to not look at the chats. Y'all keep chatting. I need to not look at them. I get taken off. So I think the Attorney General, so just so y'all know, tax exemption is at the state and federal level. Most states tie their tax exemption for nonprofits pretty much to the IRS standard. But understand that many states also require a separate application acceptance for nonprofit status. And so the Attorney General certainly could revoke TPUSA's or some hypothetical nonprofit's tax exempt status within the state of Indiana. And here I just want to highlight that as opposed to going after the individual directors, which requires this heightened showing of recklessness or willful misconduct, for these things that I just mentioned, the entity level uh, relief, that's a pretty low or pretty mild standard of care, might I say. One thing I want to mention too, let's talk again about personal liability for the directors. Indiana, like many other states, have these laws that protect volunteers of nonprofits, particularly directors and officers of nonprofits. Many people donate their time and expertise to these things. And so Indiana, like other states, many other states, have these laws that specifically protect those people from personal liability, absent some pretty, extravagant circumstances, might I say. And so if the people who are sitting on TPUSA's nonprofit board, and just so you know, most board seats are volunteer positions. Now, people get compensated for lost wages if they have to go to a meeting, um, gas or travel money to get to the meeting. So people can be reimbursed for expense. Generally, nonprofit directors aren't compensated, and so I wouldn't be surprised if TPUSAs are also not compensated. So just understand that like board members generally don't require a ton of work from a board member. Just depending on the level of involvement of the nonprofit, you might have to go 1 to 2 board meetings a year, which can be done on Zoom these days. Now, I would imagine TPUSA's board members are much, much deeper involved. So there could be some compensation there. And then also realize too, that some of these directors could also be working in an executive or other employee role and getting compensated that way. So just wanted to put that out there as well. But just know that if they are volunteer or not being compensated for their time as a director, then there might be some added level of protection if we're trying to go after them personally. But again, at the entity level, what I just talked about with what the attorney general can do doesn't require this high standard of care. So it looks like, with this being said, that it is a a decent possibility that the Indiana Attorney General could open up an investigation of TPUSA for the appointment of Erika Kirk as CEO. And just depending on whether the directors followed their duty of care, then there could be some rectification that occurs. The Attorney General, again, could do a whole host of things to try to rectify that situation. And so I just wanted to put that out there for everybody. I hope that makes people, to the extent that you feel a little burned by what your perception of TPUSA's conduct is, I hope that helps you a little bit. And so with that being said, hey, Indiana Attorney General, maybe they need to receive some emails. Maybe the Indiana Attorney General needs to receive some emails. And just so you know, Arizona Attorney General, they're obviously in Arizona. They're filed there. They're not domiciled there, but they're filed there. And so the Arizona Attorney General might also very well be someone that needs to hear about this. Not telling anybody what to do. Please understand, unfortunately, in kind of the climate that we're seeing, particularly, I don't know how aligned these attorney generals are with either TPUSA or even the Trump campaign, but just understand that some of the issues that we seem to be having with the IRS enforcement, they very well could pop up there too. I don't know that, but just kind of preparing it for y'all for what has been pretty consistent so far, unfortunately. Yeah. And I apologize if y'all hear the construction sounds. They're putting in the podcast studio downstairs. So just let me know if it gets too loud and maybe I can adjust or something. So we looked at the director liability and how if we want to, go after them personally, we have to meet this higher standard here. Let's see. So I'll just read some stuff real quick. And so, TPUSA named Erika Kirk CEO. We don't believe that they engage in a selective or competitive process, which could be detrimental to TPUSA. And so especially considering, right, when we were looking the other day at what we believe to be violations of the political activity restrictions, right, Was this ever considered by the board? Has she been reprimanded for this? So this is another thing that the attorney general could potentially take a look at, is like, hey, y'all have this CEO over here who is, again, just our perspective opinion, violating the tax code against, the prohibition against political activity, and y'all haven't done anything about it. Again, stuff like that erodes donor confidence, right? I think we'd be amiss to not understand that, there's a lot of people out there who have donated money in good faith to Turning Point USA. I've seen some comments and stuff from them that feel a little burned, and they actually have questions about whether this was actually a tax exempt donation or not, right? And so, again, the board, if they didn't do anything to censure or say something to Erika after that whole thing at Amfest, well, that could be another thing that the uh, attorney general picks up on. Nonprofits are not estates, right? So again, it seems like the passing the torch to Erika wasn't any kind of selective process, but just, I guess, Charlie's oral will sometime. And I think that there's actually a lot of people who are questioning whether that's even true, right? Whether Charlie, and I think for good reason, based upon some other statements that he had made during his life, but a lot of people are questioning whether that's even a thing that he said, right? But again, for our purposes here, it's pretty much irrelevant, because the law has a much different standard than this is what Charlie would want. Let's see. Directors generally need to have information about a candidate, and they can accept advice from lawyers, accountants, et cetera, right? So definitely, if they're, for instance, if they opened up applications for the CEO position, people made applications, the board's more than welcome to consult with attorneys, with accountants, with other professionals to help really give them all the information that they're going to need to make a good decision. They can rely on that, and they have some legal protection in relying on that. Now, information that, oh, this was Charlie's wishes, especially without some type of other instrument or document that not only says that those are his wishes, but also states the reasons why this would be beneficial and appropriate for TPUSA, then it's a deficient process, in my opinion. Certainly is. And so, we've been talking about, but definitely wanted to point that out. Directors can't rely, and I had written this, directors can't rely on someone's wishes, essentially beyond the grave in a sense, to appoint a CEO. Let's see. And then lastly, I just want to say again, highlight that, the Indiana Attorney General could remove Erika Kirk as CEO if indeed they felt that this was not an appropriate move, or that that the appropriate process was not followed in assessing whether she's actually fit for that position. So let's see real here. Mm-hmm. Just let me just say real quick on the attorney general in Indiana, what are some of the general oversight? The attorney general has standing. Well, I'll just say this. The attorney general, and when we talk about standing, ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about is that you have the legal right to bring a lawsuit. That's the best way I can kind of describe it. And so what does the attorney general, what right to bring a lawsuit against TPUSA or other nonprofits? He has standard, the attorney general has standing to investigate mismanagement. So that would be one of the ones here: seek injunctive relief, remove officers or directors, place the nonprofit in receivership. They can even dissolve the entity. They can require restitution or corrective governance. And again, they can do that without meeting a very high standard, basically just more or less a general negligence standard. So if there's any kind of feeling of negligence in what they did appointing Erika Kirk CEO, then the attorney general could potentially come through and work with some of these here. All right, so let's just talk real quick about the IRS, and let's talk about this hiring of Erika Kirk. And is this something that is actionable under the tax code for the IRS? And if so, why so? I think we can all agree that we're likely not to see any enforcement from the IRS per se. But let's also talk about, because part of my goal here is also to educate everybody about is the volume okay? I hear Mad TV says I don't hear anything. Is the volume okay? think your necklaces keep rubbing up against my desk. Okay. It might be my hands too. Is this better now? Is this a little bit better? Okay, cool. Um, so let's talk real quick. So under the tax code, what would it be them hiring Erica without doing an actual competitive hiring process? And essentially what that means is that they ensured to the best of their ability that the hiring of Erika Kirk in paying her whatever they're paying her is in the best interest of the nonprofit, meaning that they couldn't have gotten better talent for a better deal anywhere else, or at least in the relevant market. Okay. And so if this is true, if indeed Erika Kirk is being overcompensated, because we'll talk real quick. Okay, so really what we're looking at is called an excess benefit transaction. This is going to be the Internal Revenue Code, section 4958. Okay, and under that provision, if a disqualified person is overcompensated, then it's considered an excess benefit transaction. Okay, so what is a disqualified person? And I'm not going to get into the weeds there, but a disqualified person is someone who, in the previous 5 years, up until the date that we're doing this inquiry, okay, anyone over the previous 5 years who has exerted substantial influence over the nonprofit, whether it be the board or the executives, they potentially are a disqualified person. But with regard to Erika Kirk, she is the family member. Obviously, she's the wife of Charlie Kirk. And so her being a family member of Charlie Kirk, who was the CEO, obviously someone who exerted incredible influence over the entity, she is considered a disqualified person. So just know that she's considered a disqualified person, both because she's married to Charlie and potentially because she has previously exerted influence. And so we don't know that for sure, but perhaps we could see evidence where in the past she has, in one way or another, exerted substantial influence over some decision or something that the board or other officers have done. So because she is a disqualified person, let's just assume for a minute that she is being overcompensated. And so in me saying that, I'm speculating that she's getting paid the exact same thing that Charlie was, when we all know that she's not as qualified as Charlie was. And I think that, again, that's my opinion from my perspective. I have not looked at this lady's resume, don't get me wrong, but just my impression. Okay. And I think there's some people who would agree with me on that assessment, including Barron, And so if she's overcompensated and she's a disqualified person, this looks like it could be an excess benefit transaction. And so what could the IRS do? Well, the IRS could enforce the tax code, obviously, and charge the excise tax. So they could, and right here it says organization managers, including board members, can be personally hit with a 10% excise tax if they knowingly participate in this excess benefit transaction, unless it wasn't willful and due to reasonable cause. Yeah. And so this right here, so as opposed to under state law, remember I said holding these board members liable under state law would require a much higher showing, right, than just kind of negligence. But here, under the IRS route, could be a way to hold them personally liable without having to show that much higher standard evidentiary proof, burden of proof, essentially. Yeah, because they have they don't have that heightened duty under state law. I think I said that right. But anyway, so the IRS, even though we're probably not going to expect to see any enforcement per se in that direction, obviously, if they were, that would be an avenue where they could go personally after the directors and Erika potentially, without having to have the higher showing that is of recklessness or misconduct that is required under state law. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see the IRS moving very quickly to do any of this. So, again, I think at this point, we should be talking more so about the attorney general in Indiana and potentially Arizona. So yeah, any of y'all out there who are very much desiring to see some accountability be had, sending a email to the Indiana Attorney General might be an idea, and let them know that, again, it's just something that could happen. Letting them know that, hey, there's this Erika Kirk that got appointed as CEO of Turning Point USA, which we've seen, potentially violating political activity restriction. However, it's our understanding that, Mrs. Kirk was placed there because it was Charlie's wishes, basically a legacy, what looks more like a will or an estate, as opposed to some type of actual competitive hiring process. That might be an issue, Indiana Attorney General, that you might want to maybe look into a little bit. Yeah, it might not have been a good move for the public. So I wanted to point that out. Something we're probably not going to see from the IRS, unfortunately. And so let's move on. Okay. So now, so let's say real quick before we move on, because part of my mission here is to help educate everyone too. Like, instead of just pointing out everything that Turning Point went wrong, let's talk real quick about what Turning Point could have done and what most nonprofits do in order not to have something, a legacy appointment for a CEO. And one is a written executive compensation process. Independent decision makers, comparability data, contemporaneous minutes. So it's like where they accept applications, they have a meeting, they take minutes where they're questioning the applicant, where they're talking amongst themselves. Maybe they consult a lawyer, another professional. They also put that into the meeting minutes. And so that's normally how they do the CYA, cover your ass, right? Oh, well, look, we opened up a meeting, we took in applications, we spoke with the applicants, we've consulted with our attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. Do y'all understand? So that would be a way for board members to, try and absolve themselves of liability. But in this instance, right, they didn't even open it up for applications, from my understanding, at least. Okay. A political activity policy. So this would be really geared towards when you have employees that are consistently violating the political activity restriction. Have training plus a documented corrective action after a violation. Even a formal reprimand and remedial training can matter, right? So, it's one of those things where if they had like reprimanded or called Erika Kirk out, maybe in a board meeting or an executive meeting, about the political endorsement of JD Vance, that very well might be able to help absolve them personally, if the IRS or the state potentially wanted to try to hold them accountable for these things. And then a lot of nonprofit independent oversight. So this would be like an auditing or a finance committee. Something that's actually functioning, though, not decorative, right? And I know that I talked with Danks about the, I can't remember the name of the accounting firm that did the audits, right? But, having like a meaningful audit or an auditor or someone who's basically watching out to make sure that everything is between the lines. So, setting up systems or hiring people like that will help directors absolve themselves potentially of personal liability if they're ever, IRS or the Attorney General ever comes after the entity. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to transition to the last portion here, which is going to be looking at the potential for TPUSA's donors. Okay. And again, this is not legal advice. So anyone who is a donor out there, this is not legal advice to you. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm not trying to, but this is just general educational content right here. And we're going to be looking at a hypothetical. Well, some of it's hypothetical. Some of these facts have certainly come out, particularly with the red hats. I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, man. Yeah. Thank y'all so much. I got like over 117 people here at one time. I'm stoked. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. We know about the red hats. We know that they took money for red hats and people were wanting those red hats. Those are special for people. I think they even took the donations at maybe Charlie's service. So it's like you go to a service that's very special for these people, make a deal with them. Hey, you get a donation. We're going to send you a hat, sign up for our programs. And then, if in fact, that's exactly what occurred, man, So let's talk about what, if anything, donors to TPUSA, both the Red Hat donors and other donors more generally, and we'll talk in a minute, specific donors, or donors who gave money with a specific purpose. Oh, 111, yay! I like angel numbers. What could be done, for them on their behalf? And so we're gonna look. Okay, so one, donors, if you donate to a nonprofit, you generally don't have standing. Remember, the right to sue is the best way I can kind of describe it. But generally, donors don't have the right to sue a nonprofit. And that really goes back kind of to the public trust thing, that you're giving it to this entity for its stated mission, and that's it. So again, more like a public trust, with the attorney general being a trustee. And so to the extent that there's violations, for the most part, it's going to be the attorney general. um, However, there are some exceptions to this general rule of standing. Okay. um, so one, the first exception we're going to talk about is restricted or conditional gifts. Okay, so this would be basically donations that are either for a specific purpose, donations that are subject to a written agreement, or subject to written conditions. And when I say agreement, it doesn't necessarily have to be a written one. That would kind of play itself out in the contract laws we'll talk about in a minute. But you get my drift. That there was some type of written or other conditions or contractual obligations placed around the donation, which can be done, right? So you can donate to a nonprofit and specify that, hey, I want, for instance, my $1,000 to support TP Faith, under TPUSA. And to the extent that it's accepted, and that it does create a contractual obligation, like we're going to talk about in just a second. So yeah, so a restricted or conditional gift could potentially give a donor standing the right to sue the nonprofit to which they donated. Um, so again, this could be done with language either in a document or orally, like this donation must be used only for X program, or funds may not be used for political activity. Oh, they definitely violated that one from what we've seen, potentially, hypothetically, allegedly. Um, Funds may not be used for executive compensation. So again, there can be strings attached to donations to nonprofit, and it can create duty for the nonprofit to spend that money as they agreed to do. Just like anyone else, you make an agreement to do something, you can be held accountable to honor that agreement. So in that situation, if the nonprofit funds, violates the restriction, or ignores the condition, then the donor in that instance potentially would have standing to sue the nonprofit under contract, whatever other theories that there are, but it wouldn't necessarily be under the nonprofit laws. Okay. Um, so the key point here is donor intent. Did the donor intend it? And yeah, I would say too is, was it recognized by, for instance, TPUSA that was what it was? And I do think that, if I remember correctly, when I was reading through the FEC um, filings that we talked about too, a few maybe 6 days ago, it seems that they were indicating, at least on some of the social media and digital advertising and stuff, what these specific funds would be earmarked for. And I think that was probably required under 501c4. I think I'll look up and try to affirm that. But yeah, so they were doing that. They were collecting money with specific restrictions of where it was going to be spent. At least I know that I feel good that Turning Point TPA was doing that. Um, so I would imagine that at least in some way, TPUSA has taken some money. And again, we don't know about some of the larger donations, right? I would imagine that if there's going to be a donation to a 501c3 that has strings attached to it, it would probably tend to be the larger ones, right? When people are giving larger amounts of money, they want to be more assured that it's going to go specifically to where they wanted it to go, as far as this nonprofit's overall, charitable mission. Exception two, a contractual relationship. And this kind of also, folds into the first, but, if the donor relationship is not a pure gift. So sponsorship agreements, naming rights, grant contracts, quid pro quo arrangements, then the donor may sue under contract law, state contract law. And so, yeah, so with the hat, for instance, with the hat, that seems like right up the hat alley, right? That we donated on the impetus that we were going to receive a hat for our donation. That right there created a contractual, in my opinion, and generally created a contractual relationship that these donors, depending on the different state law or jurisdictions concerned, but could potentially have a state contract law claim against TPUSA for that. And hey, there's this thing that when you gather a bunch of people together who've been harmed and you get enough of them, you might have this thing called a class action lawsuit, where people who have all been injured in very similar ways by the very similar same party can all come together in one big kumbaya by the by the fire pit moment and file a class action lawsuit. So that's also a potential. Not saying to do it or not to do it or what exactly the parameters would be, but you get enough people like this who didn't get the red hat and they all did it under the same or similar arrangement, then yeah, they could probably all come together and assert their claims and probably have to be in federal court. So again, and then exception 3, the fraud or misrepresentation at solicitation. And so here it says donors may have standing if they can allege the nonprofit knowingly misrepresented material facts to induce the donation and the donor relied on those misrepresentations. So that's just a general statement of fraud, right? What I just read. That's going to be generally in almost every state. When you look at fraud, that's going to generally be the elements that you have to show. But some of the claims that could be actionable include false claims about governance within TPUSA, false claims about compliance with tax law, and false claims about the use of the funds. And so, yeah, so there could also be a potential, again, I don't know or saying that this is 100%, but, perhaps there was some fraud out there to some donors who could come and assert claims. So just wanted to point that out. I'm hoping to give people or I get the sense that there's some people out there that are losing hope, that are really losing hope that we're going to see justice and accountability. So I'm hoping that this breathes some air into your hope, that maybe one day we will see this to the extent that it's called for under the law. Again, email to Attorney General, Indiana, Arizona might help in those endeavors. Now it does say, and I would agree, mismanagement after the donation usually isn't enough, meaning that if you were to donate and then something after that donation came up to where there was an expectation that the money would be spent a certain way, probably isn't going to cut it. It more likely than not needs to be, when the donation was given, what was said to create the impetus for a potential fraud cause of action. So that's my outline for today. I guess we will switch now and go over the comments. Thank y'all. 111. Yay. Thank y'all very much. Before I hop into the comments, thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. Please like, comment, subscribe would be very helpful. I think I'm over 620 subscribers now. Just setting a goal for myself, like 750 by the end of the weekend would be incredible. I'm looking to get to 1,000, within the reasonable future and keep it going. Thank y'all. I'm very grateful. So let's look at some of these chats real quick and see how many we can get through. I don't want to keep y'all here all day long, but I definitely want to speak with you. Let's see. Hoaxing. She is a CIA. She can do anything. She has undergrad in political science and international relations, Juris Masters in legal studies, Bible studies. Yeah, I saw an article about the legal masters or Juris Masters in legal studies. Bible. I've never heard of that. Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that she's wholly unqualified. Please don't take me as saying that. But what I am saying is that when you're looking to take over an organization in the top 1% of nonprofits, it's not just any CEO or person that's got a decent resume is going to be legally sufficient to come and take the reins there. you know. And I'm actually a political science major too. As a matter of fact, just so y'all know, and I went to University of Texas in 2006. I did a fellowship through University of Texas in Washington, D.C. I interned full time for One America Political Action Committee at the time. Uh, we'll talk about that another day, but not that I'm not proud of it or whatever, but it's just kind of a little bit comical on what happened. But anyways, yeah, so I did an internship, Washington, D.C., took 9 hours of class up there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so that was back in my day where I was really involved, mostly in left, Democratic politics. Um, and then, shortly after when I went to law school and graduated and stuff, that's really when I turned away from politics a lot. And it's, kind of progressed over the years. But yeah, so I've got some DC experience. I've been in the swamp before. I've lived there. I know how it goes up there, but you know what? I'm glad I'm not there, and I'm glad now that I have that perspective and can understand what that is and how it works in many ways, so that way I can just discuss with you about it. But I really want nothing to do with up there as far as being political insiders, all that stuff. I have no desire for any of it. Okay, but I do desire to educate y'all and share my experience and things with y'all, so that way y'all can come to a better understanding of what it is we're watching in our world today, because it's getting pretty crazy. Um, says, hey, all you that watch this show go to the Common Sense Show and Sheriff Mack. I need to check out Sheriff Mack today. I meant to last night. I'm going to check him out. And you will see a lot more about Charlie Kirk cases. Well, I take that, Robert, as kind of a compliment for here too. So thank you very much. That was very, very sweet of you. I appreciate it. Robert, don't forget TPUSA has lawyers on both sides of Charlie Kirk case, so everyone should know that the case is all set up by TPUSA. Yeah, and we've been talking about this in the comments for a few days now too. I'm looking to get as much information as I can about the Burt guy who's Charlie Kirk's defense lawyer. People are claiming that he is related in some way, pretty direct way, to Terrell Farnsworth. Any information y'all can get about that? Someone sent me a link to a Jimmy Dore episode, and I think that's where I originally heard about it. I'm going to check it out tonight. But any information y'all can get, please send it over. I have pulled Mr. Burt's Pro Hoc Vice application. And so just so y'all know, and I can speak on this because I file them all the time, when you're licensed in a certain state, you can still practice in other states at times for certain cases, but you need to have an in-state attorney to basically work the case with you. And what they do in order to make that a reality, they file in court what's called a motion pro hoc vice. And really it would be, for instance, like I'll fill out the application, pay the fee, and then the lawyer I'm working with locally will submit a motion with my application attached. And then if the judge is good, then I'll be, I usually get accepted most anywhere I apply for, because literally there's about 2 to 3 attorneys in this country that do what I do at the level that I do. And so I practice all over the country. I've had to file a lot of these, but I pulled Mr. Burt's Pro Hoc Vice application to the Utah court. I think he's actually licensed in California originally, but I pulled his Pro Hoc Vice application. So I'm just looking to get just a little bit more information, and I'll whip it out and do an episode where we discuss it, and we discuss, what are the implications, because there's severe implications if indeed that is true. It's definitely has some implications we're going to want to discuss. Let's see. And thank you, Miss Susan, just for all your Joni Deputy. Thank you. Just all y'all who've been supportive. Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for letting me know about the sound. That's really sweet. I'm glad y'all didn't hear the construction downstairs. They were really loud yesterday. I'm surprised you didn't hear. Lizard, how you doing, man? I saw your Patreon comment earlier today. I'll swing by there later and respond to you. Feel free to email me, man, if you ever want to just directly contact me. No problem. Let's see. Please look into TPUSA, Clock Tower X LLC, and Trump. Let's see. I need to put down Clock Tower X LLC. I'll take a look. I will take a look and let you know if I see anything there. Connection. Thank you, Jennifer, for letting people know to not forget to like and share, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. So helpful. Thank y'all. I'm so honored to have 100 people here. Man, that's incredible. Uh, Adam Thomas Pod. Hey, man, I'm new. I'm a new channel also. I appreciate your work. I've covered you and created you in the past. Love to get with you and maybe collaborate. Yeah, dude, for sure. Adam, entheogenic@gmail.com. Dude, just shoot me an email and I would be more than honored and happy to collaborate with you. Just let me know. Okay. Let's see. Um, as a community, this organization does nothing for the community. Or Tiffany, I assume you're talking about TPUSA. Um, yeah, I mean, too. I don't, other than collecting a lot of money, and has been pretty good at dividing us too. Yeah, been pretty good at polarizing us. Also, did she send the kids to the orphanage in Romania? Um, not sure what you're talking about there, hoaxing. If you want to clarify a little bit, I knew what you're talking about with the orphanage in Romania, just not sure what you mean by which kids did she send over there. Gloria Ball, there's no doubt Cash and probably Trump are up to their ears in this scandal. The fact they are willing to ruin a young man's life is absolutely disgusting. Yeah, I mean, I can't say I disagree with you, that's, from my take on what I'm seeing. Yeah, it does seem to indicate that they were at least in some way tangentially involved. And I hate to say that. I don't want to wake up and think that my president or that the leader, the head of the FBI has been involved to any degree in something like this. But man, the facts just seem to indicate that for me. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I hate it. Um, I want to see small donors mount a class action lawsuit against TPUSA for the new direction they're bragging about. The donors donated to CK's vision, not this new direction. Oh, so that's a very good point. I didn't, especially if they've actually, and I'll look, I don't think they have, but especially if they like amended their state filings to like reflect some new mission or purpose, like that very well might be the impetus for a fraud case. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to do some more kind of digging and analyzing, but just kind of running it through right here, but very much potentially. I'll say this, based upon what I believe to be true about TPUSA and its donors across the country, I do believe that there are people out there who, as we speak, possess a very valid claim against them for a number of different things. So yeah. Let's see. Let's see. A month ago, George Webb started the process of suing Erika Kirk and TPUSA as a donor. They've been ordered to preserve evidence. Oh, Erika. George Webb. Thank you for that tip, TPUSA. Do you know what state that's in by chance, Jennifer? If I mean, I can definitely look it up, but if you hearing me right now and you can give an indication, please let me know. I will absolutely go pull that today, probably as soon as I get done, and we'll work up a live stream about that tomorrow. If she's not capable to run it, who pulls the strings? Now, granted, I will say that I would be terribly surprised if there isn't people currently at TPUSA serving as an officer director that are qualified to run it. But that's besides the point, right? Because they're not the one in the actual position with the actual authority, and that's what the law would be most concerned with. But I do imagine that they probably have, very competent people working with them for them, but they're just not, in my opinion, in the right position to, be sufficient and be compliant. Let's see. If other small donors join him, talking about the lawsuit George Webb, I think it would help bring TPUSA to heel. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, let me look into this lawsuit. If I can find it and I can locate the attorneys, I will definitely reach out and maybe I bring them on the show to do an interview and give everyone the information that they need to reach out to them. Maybe they've thought about a class action. I don't know, but let me reach out and see about it. Maybe if that happens, maybe I can help. I don't know. Again, not saying it should or whatever, but my litigation projects come sometimes at the least expected moments. But I'll look into that, and for sure we'll be reporting on it. Let's see. Sheriff Mack, that is on the Common Sense show 8 days ago. His son is standing right next to Erika at a Trump campaign 2 years ago. They say that TPUSA has lawyers on both sides of the case. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Lizard. Yeah, dude, I got up to 117 views at one time. I'm very much stoked. Uh, Jennifer saying to LW, I wonder if that letter from the IRS that was on Rules of Finance, written for TPUSA in anticipation of donors suing and as ammo to use against anyone accusing them of fraud. Yeah, and I think I said this on yesterday's live stream. Another thought that I had was, you know, for them to use it as a means to avoid discovery in a defamation suit to basically try to prove falsity, for instance, of Wolves and Finance's allegations merely by producing this letter that they're not being investigated, instead of actually showing up and producing documents to definitively prove that they weren't, uh, in violation or whatever. So, yeah, I thought about that. I didn't know, I don't think that they could do that because obviously an IRS letter stating that they're not investigating you does not equate to, oh, we didn't commit fraud by any stretch of the imagination. But, I could see how someone might get the idea that they could potentially use it that way. But again, that's just speculation, purely speculation. I don't know how that letter came about, who ordered it, what their intentions were. Or I take that back. Not that letter. Not that I was thinking. I'm talking about the IRS letter. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, it yeah, there's a lot wrong with it. Let's see. The TPUS Bay board is acting like a normal board. They have all sold out. Yeah, I mean, for them to just plop her up there, uh, and let's be real, I would imagine that if they did do some type of extra process beyond this is what Charlie would wanted, they would have definitely published that and been very vocal about it, I would think. So with that being said, just for a second, we just assume for a minute that they didn't do the process, what we've done here. But if they were acting like a normal board, they most definitely would have opened it up for applications. They would have done a process. There would have been probably a whole multitude of board meetings about it. I bet they would have probably had the applicants come and speak to the board. And so most normal nonprofit boards in terms of hiring Erika Kirk, much different process. Definitely not a legacy type of process either. Um, Thank you, Susan, for the support. Thank you so much. Um, she said, I so want a Tammy Faye Baker remix t-shirt with Erika Kirk's face on it. Remember those? That was NRSCHD, Nurse Chid. Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. Let's see. Lizard, for me, the question is, what do we do when Tyler's in jail? TPUSA face no punishment. Life goes back to normal. What's the next move then? um, yeah, that's a good question. Well, let's just hope that one, we do see Tyler justice for Tyler, whatever that looks like. Let's definitely, to the extent that TPUSA has transgressed the laws or harmed donors, that they're held accountable. Let's hope that. But if they don't, what happens? I mean, I don't think life is going to go back to normal, to be quite honest with you. I think there's enough people at this time that have been alerted to what's going on that I don't think are going to let it rest. Now, I certainly never hope that that would ever lead to anything violent or crazy or anything like that. But I certainly hope that they don't let it go if that happens. And I can just tell you right now, I'm 100% committed to making sure that it's not let go if that does happen, at least as to the extent I can with this channel, 100%. We need a shakeup in this country. The elites are out of control. I couldn't agree more. Let's see. Just make sure. The board thought that Erika Kirk could be disqualified. Maybe the board thought she could be disqualified. That might be why Liberty awarded Erika Kirk an honorary juris degree last week. Oh, they just gave it to her last week. Sorry, y'all. I should have really followed up on that story. They just gave it to her last week. That very well could be it. That very well could be it. Now that I think about it, that's crazy, huh? Have y'all seen any other content creators raise this issue yet? As far as the Erika Kirk appointment, I'm calling it an appointment. Have y'all seen other content creators? But maybe, and again, it's just speculation. Maybe they just saw generally that people were doing, and lawyers were doing, very in-depth analyses and investigation of them under the tax code, and that very well could, if that's true, they just gave it to her. I'm not saying you're lying or anything for sure, but yeah, if that's true, they just gave it to her last week. Definitely might have something to do with it. That's just speculation. Greg, as a lawyer and from a legal lawyer point of view, how would you feel if this is all whitewashed and forgotten? I mean, I would feel, and I can just kind of tell you right now. So, just over the last year, with a lot of the ICE raids and stuff, and this is just my perspective opinion, I see a real breakdown in the rule of law in respect for civil rights in the Constitution. And I can tell you how I felt was very concerned. This whole thing, I am concerned that it's going to, or that they're going to at least try to do it like this. Yeah, very concerned, man, for my brothers and sisters, for my country. Very concerned. Yeah. And so, with that, how can I help alleviate my concern? It's by showing up here every day and doing exactly what I'm doing. And I will remain committed to doing that. So thank you, Lizard. I appreciate it. And yeah, look, and when I say I'm concerned, y'all, please don't let that get you all worried or lose sleep or anything like that. I'm probably just overplaying it. But at the same time, please don't forget that, right? Because it's what the fallout from this, if they do what it's kind of looking like, indicating that they're going to do, I don't know. I just hope and pray to God that it's that we can all stick together and be good to one another and come out better on the other end. And I do feel that if we continue to put America first in everything that we do, from here until otherwise, I think we're going to be okay. I do think that America first is something everyone can rally behind. I think that anti-APAC is something that everyone can rally behind. And so let's just keep focused on those things. And this situation here obviously involves both of those. Let's just make sure that we keep that at the forefront of our mind. Bays is Base did a good video today on statistical logic. Let's see. I'm just looking. Let's see. Joe Lennox, when the feds are involved in the deception, the truth is buried deep. They claim it's in the interest of national security. Very sharp observation there. Very sharp. Yes. Yeah, it's that national security. Who was it that so famously quoted as saying, those who would trade in their freedom for protection deserve neither? I forget who said that. It was a very famous quote. This whole national security, you let the government essentially do whatever they want, just so that way we can have our security. Look, there's nothing just inherently wrong with that per se, but obviously it gets taken to the point to where now we're losing our substantive civil rights because of it. And that's where the line 100% needs to be drawn. So yeah, just be, and again, good observation there, Joe. And just so everybody's aware, whenever you hear that national security justification coming in, as my constitutional lawyer used to so hilariously say, one hand wallet, one hand gun, you're about to get fleeced. So, and I remember when he was saying that, he was talking about balancing test. Whenever you see these legal balancing tests in constitutional law, he said, one hand on your wallet, one hand on your gun. You're about to get fleeced. So that's sometimes when I hear that national security argument, I think that sometimes. So what about being promised hats and only received a pin? I believed it was. Yeah, I mean that's still potentially a contract claim, right? Now, again, we could go into the back and forth hooty hoo. If is there an exception because it was of equal value, something. So, no, but still, it would still be a case when you contract for a certain item and you perform and you pay for it. You need to receive that item, okay? Or it be the contract be reneged accordingly, right? Just sending someone something else other than what they paid for and expected, then you can't do that generally under contract law. Let's see. Thank you, Lizard. Yeah, if y'all can subscribe, be very helpful to me. All the likes, subscribe, all that stuff would just be so very helpful. I'm going to continue to do lives here and post other videos and stuff. Hopefully I'll get to the 1K subscribers, 3,000 hours of watch time is when I can start doing super chats and stuff. And so, yeah, it'd be great. Again, it's not, I'm not like trying to race to get super chats or anything like that. It'd be nice. But just so y'all know, I'll be dedicated, and to the extent that I'm able, even with super chats, I'll still try to answer as many of the other questions too as I can within reason. See, talking to Juliet's talking to him. Let's see. If they say they will send a hat for a donation and don't send the hat, isn't that a breach of contract? Generally, yes. Yeah. I mean, if we were just to take those basic facts as you just laid out, yes, that would be at face value a breach of contract for sure. Let's see. Have you heard? Oh, he's asking, have you heard of the rallies that you saw Trump, Juliet? Yeah. Okay. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and call it. I think we're at about an hour and 13. I got an hour and 11. Dude, 111. It's just hit me everywhere today. Thank y'all very much for being here. I hope everyone got something out of this. We'll keep pushing along these lines. Thank you, Susan. I'll do some investigation about this, apparently the currently pending donor lawsuit. If y'all get any information, if y'all want to drop it maybe in the comments here under this video, let's look into it. And if it's true, and not saying it's, when we find it and I locate it and I talk to the lawyers, I'll try to bring them on. I'll definitely do some content about it, and let's try to get people lined up with appropriate legal representation. That's another thing I was going to tell y'all. Anyone who's a subscriber of mine, if you, for whatever reason, run into like a legal issue or problem, and you just need to help finding somebody, a competent lawyer to help you, I will be more than happy to help you find you an appropriate lawyer to represent you, just no matter what it is. I don't want any of my people going without appropriate legal representation, anytime. So offers always on table. Much love, everybody. I'm about 90% sure I'll be doing another one tomorrow. I will publish the topic and the preview, tomorrow morning, like I have been. And yeah, much love, y'all. Have a great weekend. God bless you. Thank you for the support. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see y'all tomorrow. Much love, y'all.